Good evening and welcome. You're watching our non-stop coverage right here of the massive G20 summit, which will begin tomorrow. Leaders have started arriving. As you can see in these pictures, many leaders are already in New Delhi of what is going to be a big mega event, the largest congregation of world leaders that Delhi has ever hosted. By tonight, this evening, many other senior leaders will also would have landed. We are also expecting 3 crucial bilateral meetings that the Prime Minister is going to hold with the Mauritius counterpart, with Joe Biden and also Sheikh Hasina from Bangladesh. So those 3 bilateral meetings are also very, very significant. Joe Biden, the US President, expected to land in New Delhi in the evening around 6:30. As world leaders start coming in, the agenda for the G20 summit has been spelt out. One Earth, one future. This mission is going to be a subject matter of discussion over the course of the next 2 days. One Earth, one family, and one future. It was spelt out in a press conference today, which was hosted by the Foreign Secretary as well as the Sherpa of G20. Let's quickly listen in to what they had to say.
India felt that we should start our presidency with the theme of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That is, the world is one family. We are one earth, one family, and we should have one future. And the Prime Minister, who's the leader of G20 from India, and I act as his Sherpa, he said that our presidency, India's presidency, should actually be inclusive, it should be ambitious, it should be decisive, and it should be action-oriented. And these are the 4 principles on which we have worked. And I can assure you that we have lived up to his vision of being inclusive, ambitious, action-oriented, and very, very decisive. The New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, which many of you will see post the summit, you will see it as a voice of the global south and the developing countries. No document in the world would have such a strong voice for the global south and the developing countries as the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration. New Delhi Leaders' Declaration is almost ready. I would not like to dwell on it because this declaration will be recommended to the leaders and the leaders will then accept it. And only after it has been accepted by the leaders.
There's a World Bank report which has come out which has praised India's digital public infrastructure. I'm just trying to understand, how is India going to disseminate this infrastructure? Will it be through an organization or an institution like the Solar Alliance?
So, well, let me say that when we started India's presidency, very few people knew about digital public infrastructure and the open source model of it. This has been extensively taken forward by both the finance track and the Sherpa track in a very vigorous manner. And today's India's digital public infrastructure has been broadly accepted that this is the way to bring in financial inclusion, this is the way to do fast payments, this is the way to drive tech innovation of the future. And I think one of our great achievements, somebody had asked about key takeaways, while we are not talking at this stage about achievements, but I think one of the key takeaways of India's presidency is that the world acknowledges that India has truly revolutionized technology through the digital public infrastructure, which is a unique model.
NDTV's Vasudha Venugopal now joins us from a location which for the next 3 days, Vasudha, is going to be home, the Bharat Mandapam, home for you. Yes, please carry on. Please tell us
Yes.
what you have to say. Yeah.
So So there's a lot of activity here, and of course there was also a curtain raiser press conference, a pre-summit press conference that took place right now. And the idea that I basically gathered was India is making all attempts to ensure that the shadow of the Ukraine-Russia conflict doesn't fall on its outcomes or on its deliberations. So that was a key point. Of course, even Amitabh Kant, who's the Sherpa of India's G20 presidency, clearly said that multilateral issues are different from bilateral issues and platforms, and China on a multilateral platform also behaves differently. So it was very clear that he was specifying the fact that India is going to talk about global south, and that is what it has been doing for the past 10 months. This was also repeated by the Foreign Secretary Vinay Kwatra, who also said that India's G20 presidency also includes voices of the countries that are not part of G20 presidency. So, because there are problems in the world, and G20 is all about shared challenges but collective solutions. So India is speaking up for all of them. In that context, he also spoke about African Union's inclusion into the G20 presidency, something that Narendra Modi, as a Prime Minister, has been pushing very hard for, because he wants G20 to be action-oriented and inclusive. Of course, the press conference today made it clear that there is action on that front, but there is, of course, the leaders will have to look at it. This issue will be proposed tomorrow when the proceedings start, and then, of course, there'll be many more deliberations. Amitabh Kant also said that the leaders' declaration is almost ready, and every country in a multilateral platform has the capacity to veto, has the right to veto. So, all issues have to end with a consensus. So there's a lot of pressure, of course, but this will be a significant milestone for India if the leaders' declaration comes through. And more importantly, they also emphasized on DPI and how. One interesting thing that I saw was Amitabh Kant saying that in the West, digitization has always been propelled by big tech, but in India, DPI has been open source led. It is interoperable.
If you allow me, I'm sorry to cut you short there. We're getting some pictures from the Indira Gandhi International Airport. Do stay on with us. These are pictures of the Russian delegation now arriving. That's Sergei Lavrov, who is going to be in attendance and will represent Russia in the absence of Vladimir Putin. So this is a significant arrival of all the guests who have arrived today. Yes, Vasudha, you were saying. We'll stay with these pictures.
Yes, so I was saying that, yes.
Carry on, Vasudha, you were saying.
Yes. So I was saying that the biggest difference today in terms of technology and fintech, Amitabh Kant did specify that in the West, digitization has been led by big tech, whereas in India, DPI has been interoperable. It's been led by open source, which sort of sets it apart, and that is why it needs to be a template for developing countries. Remember, India has also been striving to be the voice of developing countries, something that has not been seen in earlier presidencies, and this was made very clear today. There were hundreds of foreign journalists today, and everybody was asking questions on the absence of Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. But the officials here basically wanted to ensure that India's G20 presidency stays on the themes of gender, accelerating SDGs, and does not really get into the Ukraine war conflict, because G20 is not the platform for it. It's for macroeconomic issues.
All right, Vasudha, many thanks for joining us. I think the one key takeaway over here is this announcement that a New Delhi declaration is ready, and it will be presented in front of these world leaders and then eventually be read out on the third day, on Sunday, is what we are learning. What will be the contents of the New Delhi declaration? What will it say? Will it follow the principle of one earth, one family, and one future? India is very, very hopeful that it will, because the structure is ready. I would like to introduce, thank you very much, Vasudha, for joining us. I would like to introduce Dr. Mohan Kumar, is the chairman of RIS. We also have Vijay Kant Karna, former ambassador. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Kumar. What should be, or what can possibly be, in the New Delhi declaration?
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I think the declaration is likely, from a purely diplomatic point of view, the declaration will have areas where the Sherpas have been able to establish consensus, and that will be in language that is black and white. And there will be a few paragraphs, I suspect, which will be in brackets, as we call it. The multilateral diplomacy, negotiators are used to calling it within brackets. When you say some language is within brackets, it essentially means that no consensus has been established, and it is fairly clear that language, Ukraine, for example, will find itself within brackets. I think where I don't have a clear whether one or two options are going to be given to the leaders so that leaders can then make up their mind on one option or the other. The other things that we can safely say about the Delhi Declaration is that I tend to believe Mr. Amitabh Kant when he says that it will be the strongest document on global South. In fact, if there is any way in which you want to dub the G20 summit in Delhi, it should be the Global South G20 summit. That's the way to do it, because issues like SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, debt relief for poorer countries, the reform of multilateral development banks, climate change, climate finance, digital public infrastructure, and food security. These are the areas where I am desperate to see a consensus. Strictly between you and me, I don't very much care for Ukraine. If we have a consensus, fine. Otherwise, it'll be a chair's summary. But I think the areas I just mentioned are crucial for developing countries and for India to establish itself as a leader of the global South. One of the most important objectives that India established for itself is that it will be the voice of the global South. So if you can get a good substantive outcome on SDGs, climate change, debt relief, food security, and digital public infrastructure, I think I will be delighted, and you can legitimately say that the G20 Delhi summit has been a spectacular success.
Vijayakant Karna, from being referred to many decades ago as a third world country to now positioning itself as the leader of the global South, do you feel that this can potentially be the big takeaway in terms of optics for G20? I mean, the real tangible results will come once the New Delhi Declaration is out. But I'm just talking about positioning here, sir.
Look, the India hosting India G20 is one of the very proud moments for South Asian people. The first thing, and it's going to be established as a global South leadership also. And the voice of the South, the first time it is going to be inclusive way presenting in New Delhi, which is a very important for the countries of the South, African, South Asian, and least developing countries and developing countries. So this is a big opportunity for the South countries of South to put their voices along with the India. And India is taking a leadership. And I'm surprised that this is the first time of such an inclusive G20 summit is being held in Delhi. African delegation everywhere, all continents are being participated. So what is my takeaway is that what I expecting that the restriction of financial inclusion, and then we are thinking that the question of climate financing, which the developing countries are facing at the moment, and we, Nepal, as a mountain countries, we are also facing this very big challenge for the climate change. And then it's another that the slogan which says that the one earth, one family, and one future. So future cannot be divided. So if it is a one earth, then the climate is so inclusive development of the least developing countries, and and then the share of the third world countries and developing countries, United Nations system, and other. And the second thing that we are expecting that the multinational financing institutions like World Bank, IMF, and other institutions, Asian Development Bank, African Development Bank, and many banks. They should be considered to first, that the credit rate system, so that the countries can contribute in the development of the poor countries.
All right, Mr. Karna as well as Dr. Kumar, thank you very much for your inputs and what you think about this G20 presidency. My colleague Saurabh Gupta is now also joining us live. Saurabh, apart from perhaps noticing what you do as far as the traffic situation is concerned, which, by the way, very surprisingly, is well managed today in Delhi. There is not much problem because most of the offices are shut. But sort of the big bilateral today among the three that will take place is one with the US President in the evening and another one with Ms. Sheikh Hasina. Now, would you like to tell us about what are the key issues that may be discussed in this bilateral with the Bangladesh Premier?
Well, it's a very important bilateral, given that the Bangladesh Prime Minister and the Indian Prime Minister are going to discuss issues of key importance to both the countries. And, India has been pushing, the success of digital currency, financial, digital finance. And, of course, one of those topics which will be where there are MOUs, memorandums of understandings that are expected to be signed, is the simplification of financial transactions between the common people of the two countries. That's what, it says. And then, of course, there are two other MOUs, which is, of course, cooperation in agricultural research and cultural exchange. Now, India and Bangladesh have a very important partnership, even as India emerges as the voice of the global South. Remember, with Bangladesh, it's also strategic importance. Our ties are extremely important. The Bangladesh Prime Minister and the Indian Prime Minister have met several times in the past. There are trade relationships as well. But beyond that, India's Act East policy is also largely, not just the Northeast states, but there's the BBIN region, the Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal region. And then you have the BIMSTEC also, which is another very important organization. But in all of this, the India-Bangladesh relationship is one that's extremely important, especially when India emerges as the voice of the global South. And the Bangladesh Prime Minister is also expected to deliver speeches. In fact, she will attend different sessions, is what our sources are telling us, and also deliver two speeches under the main theme of One Earth, One Family, One Future. And given that how close Bangladesh and India ties are expected to be in the future, given that the prime ministers of both these countries, have been talking about, it is interesting to see these, this bilateral. It's a very, very important bilateral, especially for the eastern part of the country. When you cover the Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal region or the BIMSTEC region, this is an extremely important relationship. And the bilaterals on the first day with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina of Bangladesh and Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India are an indicator of the importance of the ties between India and Bangladesh, with so many multiple layers to that relationship.
All right, Saurabh Gupta, many thanks for joining us. We're going to stop for a short break at this moment, but as we told you, three crucial bilaterals that are going to take place before the G20 begins tomorrow. One is with Sheikh Hasina, the other is with Joe Biden, and then with the Premier of Mauritius. What to expect from that meeting? We'll discuss that and much more after a short break.